Welcome back, everyone. Today I'm going to show you how to upcycle a Hawaiian shirt into a pet shirt. And you can do this project for both cats and dogs. I'm going to show you the step-by-step process of taking that Hawaiian shirt, cutting it up, and making it a perfect fit for your pet. So with all that being said, grab your Hawaiian shirts and let's get started. Getting started with supplies, you'll need one Hawaiian shirt, and it doesn't just have to be a Hawaiian shirt, you can use any style of button-up. When it comes to picking the size, you'll want it to be on the larger side so that way the collar wraps around your pet's neck measurement. The width and the length don't really matter. Typically they're going to be bigger anyways, and we're going to take those in, so as long as the collar fits, you should be good to go. The shirt I'm using is just a touch small for my dog, but I'm not going to button it all the way up to the top, so it's going to work fine. And that's another thing to keep in mind. If you're not going to button it all the way up to the top, you can go with the smaller size. But anyways, moving on to the first step, that's going to be detaching the collar and the collar band. You don't just want to cut it off because we're going to be reusing this, so we want to dethread it at the base of the collar band. Be as careful as possible, take your time, and try not to rip the fabric as you're dethreading. And after you finish dethreading, you can place the collar and collar band off to the side. For the next step, we're going to dethread the side seams and the seams, so you're going to want to flip it inside out and start with the side seams. When it comes to the side seams, you can actually cut it with scissors instead of a dethredder to save time. From here, we can lay the shirt out flat with right sides facing up and dethread both of the sleeves. Just like with the side seams, you can use scissors instead of dethreading because we're not going to be using all of that material, and if you cut off just a little bit, it won't make much of a difference. Just try to cut as close to the seam as possible. With both of the sleeves removed, we're going to place them off to the side because we will be using them in future steps. At this point, we're all done with dethreading, so we can start to begin the process of modifying it to fit our pet. And the best way to do this to get the most accurate results is to take this button up as is and place it on your pet. Make sure the buttons are on the underside, wrap it around, and reconnect the side seams. Mark the start connection point with chalk, and that's going to be our new armhole opening. Make one more mark where the leg falls on the fabric. Lay the back panel out flat, then roll it up to see how much you need to remove. Typically, you want it to fall about 4 to 5 inches from the tail. After grabbing the measurements, lay the shirt out flat with right sides facing up. As you can see, the new arm connection point that we marked is on the inside of the sleeve. This is totally fine because we're going to be reducing that opening. Before we make the arm opening cut, we want to reduce the length to cut it down to our pet's measurements. I think it's best to start with the back panel because this panel is going to be longer than the bottom. My dog's back measurement is about 17 inches from base of the neck to tail. Remember, we don't want to go all the way to the tail, but you want to leave room for the seam allowance. So I'm actually going to be cutting mine past the 17 inches and then trimming it back from there. It's best to cut it longer than needed at the start and then trim it down in future steps. For the underside, which is the button side, this one is going to be cut shorter than the 17 inches. I'm using the 17 inches as reference, and then I'm going to take it up about 4 to 5 inches. Again, this is a little bit on the longer side, but I don't want to accidentally cut it too short. Moving back to the arm openings, to make this cut, we're going to be using the chest measurement. To get this accurate, you want to measure at the tallest point of your pet's chest. And I'm using a strip of webbing cut to the exact measurement so I can use a visual as I'm making my cuts. The goal is to get the top section of the shirt pretty close to the measurement size, but not exact because you don't want it to be too tight. Based on my dog's chest measurement and the size shirt I'm using, I need to take it in quite a bit. So what I'm going to do is line it up with my new arm attach point chalk marks and bring the curve from the existing sleeve opening inwards. Which brings our second marking into play. That's going to be where your pet's leg lined up with the opening. It may sound kind of confusing, but all you really need to do is move that curve inwards to make a new opening for your pet's legs. I like to first mark it out with chalk so I can get a visual, and if you're not certain, it's best to go in just a little bit, cut it, try it on, and you can cut more off if needed from there. And once you're ready, you can make the cut. When you hit the new arm point marking, you're going to want to taper it back to the inside. We're going to remove a lot of the side back fabric in future steps, so it doesn't have to be a perfect taper. To keep both sides even, I like to take my cut piece, place it on the opposite side, and make the second cut. Before testing out the new arm openings on your pet, we want to remove some of the back side fabric. Fold the fabric in half, lining up both of the sleeve points. Make sure the side seams are pointing straight and parallel to one another. Then you're going to cut just the back panel following the side seams from the front panel. After cutting, mark where the bottom of the front panel falls on the back panel. This will end up becoming our new side seam. Just to review that, you want the front side seam to be the same size as your new marked area. Because at the far back marking, we're going to be cutting the curve for the back of the shirt. And that's what we're going to be doing in the next step. We're going to be cutting that back curve. This curve can be cut to any shape you would like. I'm doing a standard curve to start, and to do this, we're going to fold the entire shirt in half. Starting at the far back marking of the back panel, we're going to curve up towards the top edge. Unfold the panel with right sides facing up, and if done correctly, the side seam from the front should line up with the side seam of the back. I made my curve just a little bit long, which resulted in this point. It's an easy fix though. All you have to do is cut the point and blend it in with the curve of the back. And this really does come down to preference for how you want it to look. I'm trying to get a subtle curve in the back so it looks more natural and not so pointy. And at this point, it's best to try it on your pet to see how the arm openings work if you have to move them inward just a little bit. We will be adding the sleeves, so they might rest a little bit high since we don't have anything attached. But that is a good thing because that means you move the opening closer to the leg to line up. You can also readjust the back curve and length after you try it on. Keep in mind we will be adding a hem, so just give yourself a little bit of extra room. But anyways, moving on to the next step, we're going to be making adjustments in the button column. This will help reduce the width because the chest point is the tallest point and then it gets smaller from there back. So we want to do the same thing for the shirt. We want to start it off big towards the chest and then taper it back. The easiest way to do this is to remove the button columns and then reattach them, so that way we don't have to re-add the buttons and then make new buttonholes. I'm cutting mine about 3/4 of an inch away from the outermost stitch. This will give me enough room to reattach these without sewing directly on the button column. With both sides cut, we're going to reposition them on an angle. The more you angle them, the smaller the back circumference opening will become. You also want to angle both sides to the exact same degree. For the best results, I recommend measuring your pet's stomach area and going off of those measurements. When you're satisfied with the degree of movement, we're going to cut directly on that path. Remove the excess fabric and line up the button columns. The button columns will become shorter than the actual entire path, so we're going to cut on an angle from the outside edge in to match the length of the button column. Cut it on a curve because we don't want to remove any of the side seam length. Lay the button columns back on the path with right sides together, and then we're going to stitch both sides at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm using a serger for this step to get a nice clean edge. If you don't have a serger, you can use a zigzag stitch or a straight stitch. After sewing, bring both of the sides together and make sure the buttons still line up with the buttonholes, and both sides are still the same length. Again, it's best to quickly try it on your pet at this stage, just to see how that new back stomach area fits, because you can always dethread the button columns, make a new cut, and reattach. It's a lot of running back and forth to your pet, but at this stage, if it does fit good and it's nice, then you can take these measurements and use this as a template for future button-up shirts. And that's where it really speeds up the process. If you take this and put it right on your shirt, cut, then you're ready to go to the next step. And that next step is attaching the sleeves, but again, we got to reconfigure the sleeves so it works with our new sleeve opening. Just to start, the sleeve is going to be way too tall, so I'm going to trim off the bottom about 4 inches. This will vary based on the size of your pet. Line the center of the curved edge up with the center of your new arm opening. This sleeve extends past the outside edges, and that's where we're going to cut it because we want this to be the exact size as that new sleeve opening. Don't worry if you didn't get it directly in the center. We're going to clean that up by folding it in half, trimming up the sides so they match, and then the top edge. Once you have both sides symmetrical, we're going to hem the bottom edge. You can make this hem any size. I'm rolling it once a 1/2 inch and then one more time a 1/2 inch to hide the raw edge. Before we make the stitch, we're going to grab the second sleeve and do the exact same thing, but we can use the first sleeve as a template. And again, if you want to save time in the future, you can keep this sleeve as a template to reference. But from here, we're going to add a stitch directly on the hem, and feel free to add 1 or 2 stitches to each sleeve. Also, really quick, the height of the sleeve can be pretty tricky to get right on your first go, but don't worry, it's really easy to fix after you sew everything on by rolling it inwards and just adding a new hem. Grab the button-up assembly, lay it out flat with right sides facing up, and what we're going to do is line the curved edge of the sleeve up with the curved edge of our new arm opening. Remember to place the right sides together, and since both edges are curved, it's very hard to pin it down. So I start at one side of the arm opening and sew the curve as I go. Keep in mind the back part of the sleeve should fall directly on the arm opening mark we made in previous steps. If everything lines up, we're going to stitch both sleeves at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And again, I'm using a serger so I get a nice clean edge. If your sleeve ended up being a little bit long and extended past the opening, you can just trim that flush with the opening. Like always, it's best to quickly try it on your pet, see how those sleeves are looking, where they fall on the leg, and make any adjustments if needed. Everything is looking good, we're going to fold the assembly in half like we did in previous steps and line up the side seams. I like to start by lining up the sleeves, then I bring the remaining portion around to line up with the back section. If it doesn't line up perfectly with your back side seam marking, that's totally fine because we're working with the corner, making it hard to get an accurate layout without sewing it down. That's why I like to start at the sleeve and work my way back. Because you mainly just want those sleeves to be lined up so that way when your pet puts it on, the sleeve's not offset. Everything past that can be trimmed up to size, and from here we're going to stitch both side seams at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And again, I'm using my serger for this stitch to get a nice clean edge. At this point, we have the basic foundation, and now you can actually start fitting it to scale. This is why I recommend making it a little bit bigger, so that way you can take it in these steps to really get it to the right size. The easiest way to do this is to taper in those side seams towards the back if it's a little bit too wide. And you can even go back to the button columns, make any minor adjustments if needed. Remember, you don't want this to be a super tight fit since it's not stretchy fabric, so anything bigger than the actual measurements should work fine. Moving on to the next step, we're going to open up the shirt, lay it out flat, and begin to hem the back edge. Before you roll the edge over and place your hem, you want to double check to make sure it's the right length, because if it's too long, it's not going to look right. And I still think mine's a little bit too pointy for what I'm going for, so I'm going to fold it in half and kind of taper it up a little bit more so I have a flatter back edge. This varies based on the shape of your pet, so you may want to put it on and see what style looks best. I also tapered the bottom edge just a little more so it lines up with the side panels. This will give it a more natural flow and make it so much easier to add the hem. Once you're satisfied with the shape, we're going to flip it around to the wrong side and roll the edge over twice. The first roll was just under 1/2 inch, and then I rolled it one more time to the same measurement. So the amount I rolled it, I'm losing that length on the back edge, so this is why we cut a little bit more to give us enough seam allowance. Like I said before, start out small, and if you need to hem more, you can just roll that existing hem over again and go from there. It's a lot easier to reduce the fabric rather than to add it. After you placed all your pins and you're ready to go, we're going to stitch directly on top of the hem, just like we did with the sleeves, and you can add 1 stitch, 2 stitches, or even a decorative stitch. Also, you want to try to make it as neat as possible. The stitch will be very visible. And a quick tip to hide any imperfections, match your thread color to your fabric color. Put it on your pet, see how it looks and fits, make any adjustments if needed. If you're not a fan of the curved back look, I will be squaring it off at the end. It's very easy to do, so feel free to skip ahead to see how to do that. We are getting very close to being done. The next thing we're going to do is reattach the collar and the collar band. We did alter the neckline just a hair when we moved the button columns, but since it is a curved edge, there's a little bit of stretch even in non-stretchy fabric, so that amount of stretch should make up the difference. If you did end up making major changes to that neckline, you can change the width of your collar band. Quickest way to do this is to fold it in half, cut it, and remove the amount needed from the center. From there, you can either stitch it back together directly or dethread the collar band and the collar. It's a lot more time consuming, but I did this in a separate video where I split 2 button-ups and put them together. I'll put that in the description below so you can take a look at it if you need to make major adjustments to the collar and collar band. But like I said in the beginning, the most important part of this upcycle project is finding a collar that works with your pet. Because the rule I found, if the collar is the right measurement, then the body portion of the shirt will work perfectly. The final option is just to make a whole new collar and collar band, and you can easily do this by tracing this existing one, but adjusting it to the measurements of the neckline. And you should have enough scrap material left over to make this happen. But anyways, moving on, we're going to line the collar band up with the neckline, and I like to start at the button side if you have a button on your collar band, and just separate both sides of the collar band and place the neckline in between both of the layers. This step is all about being neat and precise, so place a lot of pins and stitch directly on top of the old stitch path. It is very easy to mess this stitch up because one side of the collar band might not line up with the other one after stitching, so you kind of want to check that as you're stitching. If that does happen, you can always dethread, realign, and add a new stitch. We are pretty much done, but there's a few more details I want to go over, and the first thing is squaring off that back edge, and what you do is simply roll it over once or twice and add a stitch. This will square off the bottom edge and make it look more authentic, and again, it's all up to preference and how it looks on your pet. I just wanted to show both ways so you have some options to customize it. This next step is optional. I personally find it hard to use a button-up configuration on a pet, making it hard to get on and off, but we're going to quickly fix that with Velcro. I'll be using a standard 1-inch adhesive back Velcro. You don't need to use this size. You can pretty much use any Velcro you have laying around. The good thing about this is that we don't have to remove the buttons and we still get the button look. Place one side of the Velcro to the top side of your buttonhole column and the second piece of Velcro to the bottom side of your button column. And the strips I cut are way shorter than the length of the button column. I'm just doing a demonstration. If you're really going to add the Velcro, then you want to cut the strips to the same length as your button column. I did make an entire step-by-step project for a little pet flannel. It's a very similar design to what we just upcycled. I just want to quickly show you the finished Velcro installation. I went from end to end to cover that entire button column. This is what you want to do if you plan on adding the Velcro to your Hawaiian shirt. And if you have Hawaiian print fabric laying around, you can use this pet flannel to make one from scratch. I'll leave a link for the pattern in the description below. It comes in a ton of different sizes, and I go into detail on how to alter it to fit your pet perfectly. But anyways, getting back to the project, when it comes to sewing these on, the buttonhole side is very easy, but when it comes to the button side, you're going to have to avoid the buttons. You can simply do this by sewing each section in between the buttons, so that way you're jumping the buttons as you're going. You also want to sew both sides of the Velcro so it lays flat and it secures down. Moving on to the final step, and that's adding your branding. I use strips of leather that I attach with double-sided rivets. I put these all around the garment. It's an easy and cheap way to go. You can also use woven tags, or if you have the supplies, you can add your logo by screen printing. I did end up flattening out the back edge. I rolled it over twice and added a straight stitch. Even at this point, you can still make adjustments to that back edge if it's too long. You can also make adjustments to the side seams, take them in a little bit. With this project, it's all about trial and error because you're taking something that's already made, deconstructing it, and remaking it for a totally different layout. Not to mention, pets have totally different shapes and sizes, but using these techniques and steps in the video should put you on the right path to making the perfectly fit Hawaiian shirt or button-up for your pet. And like always, have some fun with it and get creative. And there you have it, your Hawaiian pet shirt is complete. Hopefully you picked up a few skills from this video that you can use in other sewing projects. Because the steps we use in the videos, you can also apply to other button-up shirts and t-shirts. But like always, I want to see what you come up with, so tag me on Instagram at Properfit Clothing. And until then, I'm going to keep the videos coming at you, so I'll see you next time.